HOA enforcers stormed my vineyard. Except I wasn't even in their HOA. The sheriff shut them down fast. The sun was just beginning to stretch over the hills when I stepped out onto my back porch, coffee in hand. The early warmth rolled across the vineyard rows, lighting each leaf like stained glass. It was my favorite moment of the day, quiet, peaceful, untouched by the small-town noise that always managed to find me eventually. I took a slow sip, letting the quiet sink in. Then I saw the white SUV. It rolled down my gravel drive with the confidence of someone who believed they belonged there. The kind of vehicle you only saw in neighborhoods packed with identical houses and residents who cared more about their lawn height than their friendships. It didn't belong among the vines, and neither did the two people stepping out of it. One wore a reflective vest with bold black letters across the back, HOA compliance officer. The other clutched a clipboard to her chest like a weapon, her lips already pursed with preemptive disappointment. I blinked. I lived 2 miles outside of town. No subdivisions. No gated communities. No HOA. I set my mug down slowly. The woman with the clipboard marched toward me first, heels sinking into my gravel with every irritated step. Her expression already told me she expected a fight and fully believed she would win it. "Good morning," she said sharply, not waiting for a response. "We received multiple reports of violations on this property. You'll need to come sign an acknowledgement form so we can begin corrective action immediately." I stared at her. She stared back with the fervor of someone who had never in her life questioned whether she had authority. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "I'm not in an HOA." She blinked once, then twice. Then she smiled the thinnest, most condescending smile I'd ever seen. "That's what people say when they're trying to avoid fines," she said. Behind her, the man in the vest began photographing my property like he was collecting evidence for a court case. He snapped pictures of the grapevines, my barn, my truck, even my rooster, who paused mid-peck to glare at him. "What exactly," I said, folding my arms, "do you think the violation is?" The woman flipped her clipboard open with a dramatic flourish. She cleared her throat. "Let's see. Unapproved fencing, unmaintained shrubbery, prohibited livestock." "Livestock," I repeated. She pointed her pen at my rooster like she had found evidence of a felony. I pressed my hand to my forehead. "Again," I said, "I am not in your HOA. You have no jurisdiction here." She scared. "I understand you're upset," she said in a tone usually reserved for scolding toddlers. "But the rules are the rules. Everyone signed the same agreement when they purchased their homes in Willow Ridge." I dropped my hand. "Willow Ridge is 2 miles away." "Yes," she said impatiently. "And this property is the outermost lot in the subdivision." "No," I said, pointing behind me at the rows of vines stretching up the hill. "This property is a vineyard that has existed for 67 years. Willow Ridge was built 9 years ago. You're in the wrong place." Her eyes narrowed, as if I had challenged her authority on purpose. The man in the vest chimed in. "Ma'am, refusal to cooperate will result in escalating fines." My jaw tightened. The arrogance was unbelievable. "Get off my property," I said. Clipboard Karen, because that was the only name that fit, straightened her posture. "Sir, I don't think you understand how serious this is. We have received multiple complaints about your operation." Her eyes swept over the vineyard like it offended her. "And residents are concerned. Very concerned. Residents of a neighborhood I don't live in," I said. "Concerned about a property that is not in their neighborhood." She smiled again. Denial is normal at this stage. I took a deep breath. The man in the vest continued taking pictures, and then he stepped into the vines. I moved fast. "Hey, get out of there. That's private property, and those vines are delicate. Don't touch them." He turned, unfazed. "Everything inside the HOA boundaries is subject to inspection," he said. I nearly laughed. Not because any of this was funny, but because the alternative was yelling. "You know what?" I said. "We're done here." I pulled my phone from my pocket. "Either you leave, or the sheriff will make you leave." Clipboard Karen scoffed. "Oh, please. The sheriff knows better than to interfere with HOA business." That was it. I dialed. The moment the dispatcher picked up, I explained the situation. 2 people trespassing, refusing to leave, falsely claiming jurisdiction, treading through a commercial crop. The dispatcher didn't even pause. "We'll send someone out right away." When I hung up, Karen let out a long, dramatic sigh. "This is unnecessary," she said. "We're trying to help you comply." We could have resolved this without involving law enforcement. I don't need your help, I said. I need you off my land. She opened her mouth to argue again. But then the crunch of tires rolled down the road. A sheriff's cruiser, pulling in fast, dust kicking up behind it. Clipboard Karen straightened like a student caught whispering in class. The man in the vest stepped back toward the SUV. But it was too late. Sheriff Dalton climbed out of his cruiser. Broad shoulders, weathered face. A man who had probably already dealt with too many HOA complaints for one lifetime. He took one look at me, then one look at the two strangers, then at the vest, at the clipboard, at the fact that all of this was happening before 8 in the morning. For the love of God, he muttered. Then he cleared his throat. Morning, he said. Mind telling me what's going on? Before I could speak, Clipboard Karen marched forward, waving her paperwork like credentials. Sheriff, she said, thank you for responding. This homeowner is refusing to comply with HOA regulations and has become confrontational. We need assistance enforcing. Dalton held up a hand. Ma'am, he said, I know every HOA in this county, and this property isn't in any of them. Karen blinked rapidly. It is, she insisted. Willow Ridge. Ends at the creek, Dalton said. And this vineyard is a separate parcel entirely. Always has been. The man in the vest shifted nervously. Dalton caught it. His eyes narrowed. So unless you two have a warrant, a signed agreement, or literally anything that gives you permission to be here. He gestured broadly to the vines. You're trespassing. The color drained from Karen's face. But she still wasn't ready to back down. Karen never backs down. Sheriff, she said, lowering her voice but not her attitude. We received complaints. Serious ones. This property is visible from the walking path. The residents have concerns about. That doesn't make it yours, Dalton snapped. Even I flinched. Dalton wasn't usually a yeller. Karen stepped back. The man in the vest coughed quietly. So, he said, there won't be any fines then? Dalton stared at him. Son, the only fines that might be handed out today are the ones I could write you for trespassing, unauthorized inspection, and potential crop damage. Best guy went pale. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. This is highly irregular, she whispered. Dalton shot her a look. Ma'am, what's irregular is you showing up at a vineyard with a clipboard and acting like you own the place. Silence stretched. The kind that makes your ears ring. Dalton took a breath. Get in your car, he said finally. Leave. Now. And don't come back unless you're invited. They didn't argue again. They scurried. Actually scurried. Like two raccoons caught stealing from a cooler. The SUV retreated down the driveway. Fast. Faster than it had arrived. But Dalton stayed. He looked at me, eyebrows lifting. Everything okay? I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Yeah, I said. Better now? Thanks. He nodded toward the road. That HOA's been overstepping ever since they got a new board president. Woman named Brenda something. I crossed my arms. Let me guess, I said. Blonde bob haircut. Permanent scowl. Sounds like she's perpetually smelling spoiled milk. Dalton snorted. That's the one. I sighed. Great. Can't wait for whatever she does next. Dalton gave me a look. One I didn't entirely like. A look that said, this isn't over. You might want to put up some cameras, he said quietly. Just in case they try something again. My stomach tightened. Again? He shrugged. People like that don't handle being told no very well. He tipped his hat. Then he left. I stood on the porch long after the cruiser disappeared. The vineyard was quiet again. But it didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt watched. It felt targeted. And as I looked at the road, at the dust still hanging in the air, I knew something with that HOA wasn't right. Not at all. And this morning, this was only the beginning. The dust from the HOA SUV had barely settled before I went inside and poured myself a second cup of coffee. It didn't taste the same. The calm from earlier had evaporated, replaced by a crawling itch beneath my skin. A feeling that something had shifted. Something had been set in motion. And I didn't like it. I stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the vineyard, replaying every second of what just happened. The clipboard. The vest. The audacity. The part that unsettled me most wasn't the trespassing. It wasn't even the fake authority. It was Dalton's warning. That look in his eyes. He wasn't talking about an overzealous board. He was talking about a force of nature. A woman who ran her HOA like a kingdom. A queen whose power came from fear. And she was about to set her sights on me. I'd dealt with pests before. Mold. Frost. Deer. but never an HOA. I wasn't sure which one was worse. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my neighbor down the road, Emma. She lived closer to Willow Ridge and saw everything. Did two people in a white SUV just leave your place? Looked like HOA folks. Everything okay? I stared at the message. If Emma saw them, maybe others did too. Maybe this wasn't just an isolated misunderstanding. Maybe they were spreading something. Some rumor. Some claim. And I had no idea what. I typed back. They trespassed. Sheriff handled it. Long story. I'll explain later. Almost immediately, she responded. You might want to check next door. People are already talking. A groan slipped out. Not next door. Anything but that digital gossip swamp. My hands hesitated above the keyboard. But curiosity won. It always does. I opened the app. There it was. A thread titled, Concern about Vineyard Property Behind Willow Ridge. Posted by Brenda H., HOA Board President. Because of course it was. The post read like a manifesto. Residents have expressed growing concern about activities on the property adjacent to our community. Several violations and potential safety hazards have been identified. Please be patient as our compliance team handles the situation. My jaw clenched. She wasn't backing off. She wasn't even slowing down. She was doubling down. The comments were a mess. Some residents speculated I was building a junkyard. Others claimed I was illegally raising livestock. One woman insisted she heard strange machinery at night, which was just the irrigation timers. Another accused me of operating a winery without a permit. Ridiculous. Unhinged. But it didn't matter. Rumors grow like weeds. Fast. Relentless. And without mercy. I closed the app. Fine. If they wanted to make this a problem, I'd treat it like one. I grabbed my boots, stepped outside, and walked the fence line. Something about the vineyard felt different. Like I wasn't alone. I stopped. Listened. Nothing but the breeze and the distant hum of a tractor. But the unease didn't go away. Maybe Dalton was right. Cameras. Not because I was paranoid, but because I suddenly had reason to be. And paranoid people rarely expect HOA invasions at dawn, yet here we were. I opened the barn, grabbed a ladder and a toolbox, and started mounting cameras. One on the porch, one near the vines, one overlooking the driveway. Old wood creaked under my weight as I climbed, tightening screws against beams worn by decades of sun. It was grounding, steady, a reminder that this place was mine, and no HOA clipboard warrior was taking it from me. Around noon, as I tightened the last bracket, I heard tires crunching on gravel. My heart stuttered. For a split second, I expected the white SUV again. But instead, Emma's old green pickup rolled in. She hopped out, her curly hair bouncing, sunglasses perched on her head. She looked concerned, but also curious. Very curious. I brought sandwiches, she said, lifting a paper bag. Figured you didn't have time to eat after your morning battle. I cracked a smile. Thanks. Honestly, I still don't know what that was. We sat on the tailgate of my truck, unwrapping sandwiches. Emma leaned close. So I talked to a friend who lives in Willow Ridge, she said. Apparently the HOA had a meeting last night. Great, I muttered. What now? Did they vote to annex my land? Emma didn't laugh. Not even a smile. She just nodded. Slowly. Purposefully. You're joking, I said. No. They're talking about extending the HOA boundary to protect community aesthetics. Brenda pitched it as a safety issue. My grip tightened around the sandwich. Safety? Yep. From what? Emma shrugged. According to Brenda, the risks associated with commercial agricultural operations near residential areas. I stared at her. Emma, this vineyard has been here longer than any of those houses. I know. This is insanity. I know. My pulse thudded in my ears. If they tried to expand their boundaries, if they tried to force me into their HOA, that wasn't just trespassing. That was war. Emma leaned back on her hands. You're not going to let them push you around, right? No, I said. But I need to be smart. Because people like Brenda didn't act alone. They built armies. Passive-aggressive armies with clipboards and laminated rules. And then Emma said something that made my stomach clench. My friend said Brenda's organizing volunteers. I looked at her slowly. Volunteers for what? Emma hesitated. To gather evidence. I shut my eyes. Of course she was. Because if the sheriff shut her down legally, she'd switch tactics. Take the unofficial route. Send her little army of rule zealots to watch me. To nitpick. To cause problems. She can't keep doing this, I whispered. Emma shook her head. You don't know Brenda? To her, backing down is losing. What does winning look like? Control, Emma said softly. Total control. A breeze rustled through the vines. The shadows they cast seemed longer somehow. Darker, like the vineyard was holding its breath. Emma stood. I'll let you know if I hear anything else. But be careful. Willow Ridge runs on drama, and Brenda knows how to stir it. After she left, the silence felt heavier, dense, like the air before a storm. I walked the vineyard again, row by row. Something in me had shifted too. Resolve, maybe. A sharpened edge. Because if Brenda wanted a feud, fine. But she wasn't going to like the outcome. As I rounded the western row, something glinted near the fence. Metal. Small. Half buried in the dirt. I crouched and picked it up. A nail. A long one. Fresh. Sharp. Placed directly under a tire track. My jaw locked. Someone had tried to spike my tires. Not an accident. Not erosion or weather. This had been put here. Deliberately. Recently. A cold chill crept up my spine. Brenda's volunteers. Already at work. I stood slowly, scanning the tree line. The wind stirred the leaves. But nothing moved. No footsteps. No figures. Just the creeping unease that I was being watched. As I walked back to the house, the anxiety simmered into anger. Quiet, controlled anger. The kind that made me think. Plan. Prepare. By sunset, I had 4 more cameras installed. Motion sensors synced. A spotlight added above the driveway. The vineyard glowed with a soft electronic awareness. Not threatening, but vigilant. Ready, just like me. I sat on the porch steps as darkness settled over the land. The cicadas hummed. The stars emerged. Everything felt calm again. But I knew better. This peace wasn't real. It was a pause. A deep breath before whatever the HOA had planned next. My phone buzzed. A new text. From an unknown number. Just one sentence. You should stop causing trouble. No name. No context. But I didn't need it. I knew exactly who it came from. Or who had ordered it. And suddenly, the night didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt tense. Shifting. Alive with hostile eyes. I stood slowly, scanning the darkness. No movement. No shapes. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It sat heavy in my chest. A warning. A promise. This wasn't over. Not even close. And the worst part? Brenda hadn't even made her move yet. Whatever today was, it was only the opening act.